everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my July wrap-up. I ended up reading 12 books in July, which I'm very content with because last month I think I might have read too many books. So I kind of took a step back a little bit and calmed the hell down, basically. So we're gonna talk through the 12 books that I've read this month. I feel like I've had a pretty good reading month. I've really enjoyed a lot of the books that I've read, and I've really enjoyed a couple of books that are not my typical fare, you know? So we're just gonna jump into those, and I'm really excited to talk about them. So the first book that I read this month was Caraval. I actually read this entire series, so I might just go ahead and talk about all three of them. I read Caraval, Legendary, and I also read Finale, but I don't have a physical copy of this, and I really enjoyed this series. I gave the first one a 4 stars, I gave the second one a 4 stars, and I gave Finale a 5 stars, so it was a pretty good series. Really solid. Overall, I just really loved Stephanie Garber's writing. It's so fantastical and whimsical, and it's also magical. Can I find any more words that end that way? Probably, if I tried. So I'm gonna give you like a quick kind of overall plot summary for this first book, and then I'll kind of talk about them individually. So this series follows Scarlett and Tello, who currently live with their father, and their father is literally the biggest piece of trash human you've ever met. Like, he is awful, frankly. But Scarlett has been writing to the person that runs Caraval, whose name is Legend, for years. She's always wanted to be invited so she can run away with her sister from her father and just live a different life. And eventually Legend does send her 2 tickets, so they go to Caraval, but once they get to Caraval, her sister actually gets kidnapped by Legend, and this whole book is about her winning Caraval to get her sister back. Overall, I really love this first book. It's a really quick read. I love the sister dynamic, even just throughout this entire series. And the first one was just great. The second book, Legendary, focuses on the other sister, Tella, whose mission is to get somebody back in her life that she's been missing for a while, and this is kind of her experience playing Caraval to get that piece of information that she wants. So it's very similar in plot, kind of, to the first one, but like different character, different reasons why they're playing this game, and it's just interesting to see the difference between how the 2 sisters play Caraval. And then the third book, Finale, is kind of a dual POV type situation that follows both of the sisters and kind of focuses on the love interests in their life and working through their own relationships. Overall, for the series, it's so magical, it's just so fun, it's a really easy read, and I had a really good time. Also, Stephanie Garber's descriptions of things are absolutely gorgeous. I have a single tab in this entire series, and it is because the way she described this dress, I was like, oh my god. It says it looked like a fantasy a garden had cried. Are you kidding me? I want to wear this dress. That's kind of just like a taste of how she describes things. It's so lyrical and lovely, and I love her writing so much. So I really loved the Caraval series. I really loved all the characters. There's so much more that I could go into with this series, but I will keep this brief for now. I really enjoyed it. Next up, I actually have a couple of classics. I think I actually read 3 different classics this month, which is the most classics I have ever read in a given month, so I guess I was feeling intellectual. So the first of those is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. I've actually been reading this and the next classic I'm about to talk about since May. So I'm really glad I finally finished both of them, because I cannot stand having books on my currently reading list for like longer than a couple weeks. I don't know, there's just some, I'm just like, get away from me. I either need to finish you or DNF you. But I finally decided to finish both of these. This one is not my favorite. So this follows our main character, Catherine Morland, who is obsessed with Gothic novels. She loves them. She wants to like live in a Gothic novel. Like, girl, me too. But she gets invited to go with her aunt and uncle to Bath for a short time, where she is basically there to find a man. Come on now. Where she meets Henry Tilney. Now, I loved Henry as a love interest. Like, I've only read 2.5 Jane Austen books at this point, but I think he's been my favorite. And I don't know if that's just because he's closer in age to me or whatever, but I really liked him. But they kind of have this little thing going on, and then eventually he invites her to their family home, which is Northanger Abbey. Now, seeing as she loves Gothic novels, she is so excited to go to this abbey. However, once she gets there, she starts getting a little too excited. And honestly, it gives me secondhand embarrassment. At one point, she literally accuses, like, Henry's father of murdering somebody. Honestly, the setup sounds really fun, and I really thought I was gonna love it. but it doesn't really get good until they get to Northanger Abbey, which happens like 3/4 of the way through the book, maybe like 2/3, I don't know. At any rate, it didn't happen soon enough for my liking, so I didn't love the book. However, I watched the 2007 adaptation of the book, which is actually just like uploaded on YouTube if anybody wants to watch it, and I absolutely loved the adaptation. So I kind of want to like reread this book now, even though I didn't like it that much, but I have like visuals for the characters and how the characters were portrayed by these actors, and I loved it. Once you can get past the secondhand embarrassment of Catherine acting like a 12-year-old, then it gets good, you know? I loved the 2007 adaptation. I've seen it twice. Like, I watched it one night and then I literally watched it the next day. I loved it. Anyway, so there's Northanger Abbey. Next up, I decided to read Dracula. I think this might have to be my favorite book of the month. It's definitely my new favorite classic. I loved it for the most part. The first part of this book follows Jonathan Harker, who is invited to Dracula's castle in Transylvania, and while he's there, he's kind of noticing some weird things. There's this one part where he sees Dracula climb out of his window on like a tall like spire, whatever, on the castle, and he's like crawling down the building like a, I don't know if he described it as like a lizard or if I'm just imagining that he climbed down the wall as a lizard, but it was honestly like the worst visual I've ever had, because what I'm imagining is like a cross between the Count from Sesame Street and a lizard crawling down this tower wall. Also, I kind of did imagine Dracula kind of just as a human version of the Count from Sesame Street. We won't think about that for too long. But overall, I absolutely adored the first part of this book because it's so gothic and creepy, and I was like actually like not scared, but it was like a little eerie, and I just loved the tone of it all. Although the second part of this book does kind of switch up the locations, and they're in this town, I think called Whitby, but the majority of that takes place in a graveyard, which I was also into. And it was also spooky, and I just loved it. I wish I would have read this in fall. It would have been literally the perfect fall read. Kind of sad that I didn't read it in the fall, but I am glad that I finally finished it. This book is also an epistolatory, I think that's the word, story, so it's told in letters, which I feel like made this a lot easier to read. You're kind of reading like letters and diary entries, and it feels like short chapters, which I love books with short chapters. We all love books with short chapters. We know this. They're great, superior kind of books, and you just feel like you're flying through it. So I loved Dracula for that reason. A couple of points where I didn't really like it as much were the fact that it did slow down a lot. It's very slow towards the ending, and also the ending is very lame. Honestly, I was expecting like this big fight kind of scene between Van Helsing and Dracula where they were gonna have this struggle. He was gonna like go for the stake, and then Dracula was kind of like push back a little, and it's gonna like this back and forth. It's gonna be like big sequence, you know. That did not happen. It wasn't like bad. I'm not mad at the fact that the ending was kind of anticlimactic, but that is a thing to be aware of. It gets so much slower towards the end of the book, but if you can push through it, I definitely think it's worth it, and I'm glad that I've read this now. Okay, so next up I'm going to talk about the books that I read for Summerween. I do have 2 full vlogs for this readathon if you want to check those out as well, but I'm also going to briefly recap my thoughts in this video as well. The first book I'm going to talk about is The Ghost Tree by Christina Henry. I gave this one a 3.5 stars and I really enjoyed it. This book is first of all set in a small town, which you already know that horror books set in small towns, top tier. Set in the 80s. Horror books set in the 80s. Top tier. There are vicious murders going on in this town that nobody seems to remember. Scary, but top tier. This book is honestly just a ride. It's got elements of horror. It has focuses on relationships between like mothers and daughters, friends growing up together and kind of growing out of friendships, and just so much more than what you might expect a horror book to be, but I really enjoyed it for that reason, and I just thought it was really good. Next up, I read an audiobook, which was Ghostland: An American History and Haunted Places. This is literally exactly what you would expect it to be. This book is kind of set into 4 different sections, which all cover like different types of haunted spaces. So the first part, which I loved so much, I thought it was so interesting and I was so excited for the rest of this book, talks about haunted mansions and houses and all of that kind of stuff, which I love. Haunted houses. I loved the first part of this book. It was so interesting. It talked about so many interesting houses that I kind of had been aware of, but I didn't know anything about them. If you want to know what my favorite house that they talked about was, it was the Winchester Mystery House in California. The kind of creepy story that surrounds this house is that the woman who lived there was told by, I don't know, like a psychic maybe, that as soon as she finished building this house, she would die. So she just never stopped building on this house. I don't remember how many rooms it has. Double digits. A lot of rooms. You should look up a picture of it. Actually, never mind. I'm going to show you a picture of it. It's huge. It's so interesting though. And then they also talked about the House of the Seven Gables, which I think I did a book report on once in high school, even though I never read the book. But there's a book based on it, and I would love to go see the real house, even though I don't think the real house ever had 7 gables, which is unfortunate. But overall, like, those are just a couple of the more interesting ones. I really liked that part, but the rest of it, not so much. I got really bored, not gonna lie. I did finish it, but I got really bored. Next up we have Dead Voices by Catherine Arden. This is the second book in the Small Spaces series. Is that what it's called? Small Spaces? Yeah, Small Spaces. I really enjoyed this book. This follows the same 3 characters from the first book, but this time they're going to this ski resort in the middle of the mountains. They're in a blizzard. Nobody else is there. The power goes out. They think it's haunted. It's a whole thing. I was into it. Took some twists that I wasn't quite expecting, even though I probably should have been expecting them, but it's fine. And overall, I loved this book. I gave it a 4 stars. I have loved both of the books in this series, and I'm super excited to read the third one, Dark Waters. And I think there's another one coming out that kind of surrounds clowns, maybe? That might be coming out this year. I'm not sure. At any rate, I'd like to read them because this series is just so fun. It's not really that scary, but it is just a fun, spooky time. You know? So there's Dead Voices. Next up we have The Girl from the Well by Ren Chipeco. I gave this book a 3 stars. I didn't mind it, but I didn't like it either. Really, I don't know. I was just kind of bored. And the way that Ren Chipeco tells the stories is interesting because it's like a slow, kind of creeping story is probably how I would describe it. But I don't know. I don't really have like too many feelings on it. I'm rather neutral about it. So it was okay. I don't know if I'd recommend it though. Moving on. The last book that I read for Summerween and the last classic that I read this month is Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu. I also feel very neutral about this one. I think I definitely prefer Dracula as far as classic vampire stories go, and that might be a product of this book being so short because normally I can't really connect to stories that are this short. I think it's only about 140 pages, although I love this edition because of the stunning illustrations in it. I think I've shown this like so many times. Like every time I talk about this book, I'm like, look at the illustration, but look at the illustration. Do you see the, look at this castle. I love it. I feel like it's worth the read, but definitely don't go in with high expectations just because it is rather straightforward and you kind of always know what's about to happen. It's just a very basic vampire plotline, and I liked the characters. I liked Carmilla as the vampire. Actually, I just remembered the part of this book that I really like. Obviously, Carmilla has been around a while, and she's used a couple of different names, and my favorite part of this is that all her names are anagrams, so you can spell them with the same letters that are used in Carmilla. I wish I could find what they are just because I think it's really funny. I think one of her other names was Malarka, and I can't remember what the third one is. Mirkala, that's the other one. I just think it's so funny. I was like, and nobody figured that out? Nobody. I mean, I probably wouldn't have figured it out, but I have higher hopes for people who are not me, but I thought that was really funny. Aside from that, it was okay. They got the vampire in the end. Whatever. Next up, I read Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This is, it's not a sequel. It's just another series set in the Caraval kind of universe. One of the main characters in this book was introduced in Legendary, whose name is Jax, and he is the Prince of Hearts out of like this deck of Destiny, which I'm not going to go into explaining just because it's kind of complicated. But he is one of the main characters in this, as well as our like main character, who is Evangeline Fox. She is like in love with this dude. But then one day, this dude shows up and he's like, actually, I am now engaged to your stepsister. And obviously she thinks he is cursed. She is not having this. She cannot believe it. So she goes to the Church of the Prince of Hearts and she makes a deal with him that in exchange for stopping the wedding, she will give him 3 kisses whenever and to whomever which is a very interesting setup, and everything kind of goes from there. I really liked this book. I feel like Stephanie Garber's writing just got even better in this one, and I love how things are described. This one, they kind of go north, so they're in this gorgeous kind of, I'm assuming it's snowy, it's kind of how I was picturing it, but castle, and she like starts talking to this prince, and I was like, wow, what a life. Honestly, I really liked it. I ended up giving it a 4 stars. I think I like Caraval just a little bit more as a series, but I still thoroughly enjoyed this, and I'm super excited for The Ballad of Never After. Finally, we're at the last book, which is good because I always get so out of breath when I film videos like this. There's just too much talking, but that is the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. This was the first book for me and Cass's book club, Wyverns and Words. I actually have like a whole live show on my channel. It should be like the last video that's on here. In case any of you have read it and kind of want to see what we had to say about it, I thought the live show was really fun, and I just had such a good time doing that. But I think as far as this book goes, I ended up giving this book a 4 stars. For the first part of this book, I was like, this is a very solid like 3.5 kind of star read. Then this one thing was revealed, and I was like, there we go. That's why people love this book. And I thought it was genius the way that this book is written. If you don't know much about this book, even though I feel like most people do, it's rather popular for a good reason. It was literally the winner of the 2016 Hugo Award, so good friend K. Jemisin. We're living in this world. It kind of seems post-apocalyptic, which is rather bleak, but rather interesting. And you're following 3 women who are all origins, meaning they can kind of work with the earth to quell these earth shakes and help with seasons. Now these seasons are called 5th seasons, where just really bad things happen on the earth, like terrible things. They have named them. Let me just give you a couple of names of the seasons because they are yikes. We have the choking season, the acid season, the boiling season, the season of teeth, the fungus season. That sounds gross. This kind of follows these 3 women and how they are dealing with their powers because they are seen as outcasts in society, because nobody trusts them because they think they have too much power over the earth, and it's just very unnatural to everybody else. So like everybody hates them basically. Actually, just let me read you, maybe I'll just read you the back of this book. I feel like it does a better job at explaining it than me. This says, "This is the way the world ends for the last time. It starts with a great red rift across the heart of the world's sole continent, spewing ash that blots out the sun. It starts with death, with a murdered son and a missing daughter. It starts with betrayal. A long dormant wound rises up to fester. This is the stillness, a land familiar with catastrophe, where the power of the earth is wielded as a weapon and where there is no mercy." So yeah, there's the 5th season. Anyway, I really hope you guys enjoyed this wrap up. If you did, as always, let me know down below what your favorite book you read this month is, and if you're feeling shady, let me know what your least favorite book is. Again, those are like my absolute favorite ones to see. I love hearing you guys talk smack on books. So yeah, let me know. And I will see you in my next video.